Let me go to Jennifer on that. She's not as bad as you think. This could go down in history as one of the most amazing bumper stickers I've ever heard.
Yeah. Well, you know what's amazing is that during the debate when Obama was not doing a very good job defending himself and he just wasn't getting out there and hitting back, what she was doing is basically saying, I know you don't like me right now, voters. I know you think I'm really mean because I'm hitting him hard as though he were my general election opponent. I'm trying to dig him a grave. But you know what? That's how hard I can fight because I've been fully vetted. She hasn't been fully vetted. I mean, part of the reason the media doesn't explain what it is they're suspicious of is they had to cover her throughout the 90s. The baggage is pretty heavy, right? And so she's operating in that mode, and I think it really could hurt her. That's why I say that gap could narrow further.
This kind of game in which anybody who I know, regardless of how flimsy the relationship is somehow their ideas could be attributed to me. I think the American people are smarter than that. They're not going to suggest somehow that is reflective of my views, because it obviously isn't.
Well, I think that is a fair general statement, but I also believe that Senator Obama served on a board with Mr. Ayers for a period of time, the Woods Foundation, which was a paid directorship position. And if I'm not mistaken, that relationship with Mr. Ayers on this board continued after 9/11 and after his reported comments, which were deeply hurtful to people in New York. And I would hope to every American, because they were published on 9/11, and he said that he was just sorry they hadn't done more. And what they did was set bombs. And in some instances, people died.
I'm going to have to respond to this just really quickly, but by Senator Clinton's own vetting standards, I don't think she would make it, since President Clinton pardoned or commuted the sentences of 2 members of the Weather Underground, which I think is a slightly more significant act than me serving on a board with somebody for actions that he did 40 years ago.
The FBI shot this hidden video of 2 Puerto Rican nationalists making bombs in a Chicago safe house 16 years ago. And now that grainy footage has become ammunition in a battle between the White House and Congress over the president's grant of clemency to these 2 and 9 other Puerto Rican nationalists.
And what they did was set bombs. And in some instances, people died.
Nobody dreamt that this was a daytime bombing of a restaurant in New York City in the United States of America, because it simply was not the sort of thing that happened in America.
The senseless bombing had been perpetrated by what was arguably the most active terrorist organization in U.S. history, the FALN. But in 1975, the FALN was a newly formed, previously unheard of organization that through deadly violence advocated complete independence for Puerto Rico.
6 people were killed in the FALN bombings over a period of several years, and more than 70 were injured. But the White House says the people who got clemency don't have blood on their hands.
In this case, they were convicted of very serious crimes, not of maiming or killing, but of serious weapons offenses.
The 2 people in this video, Edwin Cortez and Alejandrina Torres, were convicted of conspiracy to make destructive devices and possession of explosives, among other things.
And what they did was set bombs. And in some instances, people died.
But the president apparently believes that the people who made bombs are different from those who set them off.
Because I did not believe they should be held in incarceration, in effect, by guilt by association.
Critics in Congress from both parties don't buy it, but clemency is a presidential prerogative, and Congress may not be able to stop it.
Hillary's biggest problem running for the Senate was that she wasn't a New Yorker. And how is she going to appeal to the specific ethnic groups that make up the New York State electorate? So, in September 1999, right in the middle of her Senate campaign, she was approached by City Councilman Jose Rivera, who really is a spokesman for the Hispanic community in New York, who gave her a packet urging the pardoning of the FALN terrorists. And included in the packet was a letter to Hillary asking her to use her influence on her husband to get these pardons granted. And 2 days later, they were.
Freedom came today for most of the 14 Puerto Ricans who accepted President Clinton's controversial gift of clemency. 11 of them, who describe themselves as nationalists, some others describe them as terrorists, were released from federal prisons around the country.
It made no sense. Not one of the incarcerated FALN terrorists had requested clemency or had expressed any remorse. In fact, prior to that action, the Clinton administration had granted clemency in just 3 cases out of over 3,000 applications, according to the Office of the Pardon Attorney at the Justice Department.
It was putting a political agenda of the Clintons above my father's life.
And what they did was set bombs, and in some instances, people died.
Sandy Berger appeared on television a day or two after the pardons were granted, or after the clemency was granted, and stated that these people were not personally involved in violence. That's simply not the fact. In this case, these people were convicted of planting 36 bombs in Chicago. If that's nonviolence, then Mr. Berger's dictionary is a little bit different than mine is. The Department of Justice received a memo from the FBI saying that under no circumstances should these people be released. The President of the United States, who had access to all this information, ignored the facts of the matter.
And what they did was set bombs, and in some instances, people died.
You have to ask yourself, who benefited from this besides the terrorists themselves? It's my view that have concluded the only other person that could have benefited from this was Hillary Clinton.
The Senate, on a 95-2 vote, later denounced President Clinton's FALN clemency. Candidate Clinton claims she is the most experienced. Her husband claimed she was intimately involved in his administration, and yet Hillary said publicly she had, quote, no involvement in or prior knowledge of the decision.
Obviously she knew about it. Obviously she asked Bill to do the pardons, and obviously when she says she knows nothing about it, she's not telling the truth.
By Senator Clinton's own vetting standards, I don't think she would make it, since President Clinton pardoned or commuted the sentences of 2 members of the Weather Underground, which I think is a slightly more significant act than me serving on a board with somebody for actions that he did 40 years ago.
The job which we should have done, which should have been our primary focus to find, bin Laden.
Mr. bin Laden used to live in Sudan. He was expelled from Saudi Arabia in 91 and he went to Sudan. And we did it. They released him. At the time, 96, he had committed no crime against America, so I did not bring him here because we had no basis on which to hold him. Though we knew he wanted to commit crimes against America. So I did not bring him here, though we knew he wanted to commit crimes against America.
Secretary of State Madeleine Albright said, well, if we bomb Afghanistan now, it's not a good time to bomb Muslims. It'll essentially blow up the Middle East peace process and doom any chances President Clinton has of winning the Nobel Prize for Peace.
I was delighted when Jimmy Carter won the Nobel Peace Prize because I thought he earned it, and I thought it was great because he got it as much for what he did after office as when he was in office.
Bill Clinton is still campaigning for the Nobel Peace Prize.
I remember exactly what happened. Bruce Lindsay said to me on the phone, "We'll guide a second plane is at the tower." And I said, "Bin Laden did this." That's the first thing I said. He said, "How can you be sure?" I said, "Because only Bin Laden and the Iranians could set up a network to do this. And they wouldn't do it because they have a country and targets. Bin Laden did it."
Did you also think at the same time we came pretty close to getting them?
Yeah. I thought that my virtual recession was well placed and I was full of regret that I never did it. I mean, I immediately thought that he had done it. I always ask the same question for 8 years. Can we kill him tomorrow?
Bin Laden is alive today because Mr. Clinton, Mr. Sandy Berger, and Mr. Richard Clark refused to kill him. That's the bottom line.
Fool me twice. Shame on me. Hillary's commander-in-chief problem. It isn't that they can't see the solution. It is that they can't see the problem.